Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Dharma Bum Basics Discussion Circle. My name is Travis. I facilitate this group. So, tonight I'm not sure what we're going to be doing quite yet. The general structure of this class is we'll start with a guided meditation of some kind. It varies week to week. And then I'll probably talk a little bit, but if you have any questions or suggestions for a topic, you could leave that in the live chat. That would be appreciated. I don't always prep ahead of time for class, so if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. When I first started leading classes, oftentimes I would get a bit obsessive over preparing for the classes. And it's been my practice lately to try to not prepare, or to try to prepare as little as possible. So let's see, sounds a little low. So I'm not sure there's anything I can do about the sound quality right now. This is my first time using this setup. So it's basically been my practice lately to let go of a little bit of that control, because really that's what that comes down to. Wanting to prepare for a class is kind of emphasizing or tugging on my desire to have everything under my control, everything as primed as possible, all possibilities accounted for, so that I can react in the best way possible or present in the best way possible. And really that comes down to this neurotic part of myself that needs everything to be perfect, needs to have everything dialed in just the way it needs to be. And that really is, it can be very good as a driving force, but it's also very detrimental to your own mental well-being when you're trying to control everything, make everything perfect. It certainly has its time and place, but the time and place isn't everywhere all the time, which is what it tends to be like for me when I'm doing these kinds of things. So a perfect lesson in abandoning control, for example, as Roberto mentioned, maybe the volume's not quite right. I don't know how to fix that right now. So we'll just go with it. And anytime we notice ourselves having any aversion to the sound quality, we can check in on that. We can see if if it's causing us to build up tension in the body. We can relax it. We can notice if there's tension in the mind, and we can relax that. So, as you know, normally I lead this class from the temple. Right now I'm not at the temple, so I decided to, just for today, I decided to do the robot voice. Oh no, never again, hopefully. I decided to try doing it here and be okay with whatever the quality of it is. So we'll see. It'll be fun little adventure for all of us. So today we'll be doing some kind of meditation. I'll probably figure out what it is sometime between hitting the bell the first time and hitting the bell the last time. So let's get started. If you're brand new to meditation, it's helpful if you're sitting in a chair to have feet flat on the ground. If maybe not fully utilizing the backrest, especially if you're in a recliner of some sort, maybe scooting up to the edge of the seat and holding yourself up, you're more likely to stay aware and stay awake. I like to have the tongue pressed gently against the roof of the mouth and the back of the teeth. Prevents the buildup of saliva, which can become a distraction. If you're sitting on the floor, just try your best not to kind of cross your legs over one another where you're putting them to sleep. Ideally, though, if you're sitting on the floor, hopefully you already know how to sit on the floor. And if you're just doing it because you saw it in a magazine, maybe pull a chair up. You don't get awakened any faster on the ground than you do in a chair. So just do whatever is the most comfortable to maintain a posture that's not distracting. Not distracting because it's too comfortable, not distracting because it's too uncomfortable. Try to find that middle ground there, that middle path. So with that, we'll get started. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Noticing if deep breathing feels good, and if it does, you can keep on breathing in this way. If it doesn't, you can switch things up. Maybe even deeper still or more shallow, heavier or lighter, in long and out short, or in short and out long. Just playing with the breath for a bit, noticing what the body needs in this moment. And when you found a rhythm and texture of breathing that does feel good for the body, just maintain it for a while. And see if while maintaining it, you can soften into this breath. And as you maintain this awareness of the in and out breath, notice what kind of perception you hold about breath and awareness. Do you perceive them as two separate things? What would happen if you held the perception that breath and awareness were one thing, one fluid activity? Without the breath, awareness would die away. And without awareness, you would not notice the breath. So they can be thought of one thing instead of two. Just notice if the shift in perception causes a shift in experience. Breath awareness in, softening the forehead, unclenching the jaw. Breath awareness out, dropping the shoulders. because breath and awareness are joined together like this, wherever your awareness goes, the breath will flow. It will follow the awareness because they're joined in our perception. So you can guide your awareness, the breath, to the very base of the spine. As you breathe in, you can trace your awareness up the spine, lengthening the spine, all the way up into the head. On the between breath, just notice how that feels and allow it to spread out from the head. As you breathe out, allow your awareness to gently glide back down the spine to the base of the tailbone. And again on the in-between breath, allow awareness to radiate out from the tailbone. And that's it. Just maintaining this tracing of the spine up and down. Softening and relaxing around the breath. And as you continue tracing the spine, you can just notice how these different breaths feel. That sensation of rising on the in-breath, that sensation of this kind of calm rippling out on the in-between breath, and the sensation of falling on the out-breath. as well as any sensations of tension in the back, where you can use this breath to consciously relax them. Thinking of the breath flowing through pain and tension, dissolving it away all the way in and all the way out. And now, as you maintain this tracing of the spine upward as you breathe in, radiating out in between, and downward as you breathe out, radiating out in between. As you maintain this process, each time you trace the spine, you can allow your awareness to expand slightly. So you become more and more aware of the area around the spine, outward and outward, very slowly until your awareness fills the body, all the way from the crown of the head down to the toes of the feet. But don't be in too much of a rush because you want to be thorough in your awareness, thorough in working the breath through the body, this breath awareness. And as you're slowly expanding this awareness and breath through the body, if you come across any tension allow breath awareness to flow through the tension and dissolve it away. Breath awareness flowing down, filling the arms, all the way to the tips of the fingers. Filling the throat and the chest and the stomach with this awareness. And all the way down the front and back of the legs. The tops and bottom of the feet. Suffusing the hips and the back and the shoulders and the head. Just resting in this broad awareness. And as you keep your awareness broad, if you notice that the mind has wandered, you can release the distraction, not pushing it away, not gripping onto it, simply releasing. You can relax any tension, any physical tension that came along with this distraction. You can reestablish this broad awareness and return to breath. And if you want, you can even allow a gentle smile to rest on the face. a few moments, we'll open our eyes, but before we do that, we can end this session by thinking of any sense of ease or well-being you felt during this meditation, and dedicating it to someone whom you know is suffering at this time. May they experience this ease and this well-being. May our practice not only benefit ourselves, but those around us. You can just rest in that wish and that thought for a moment. And with that thought in mind, maintaining this broad awareness, you can slowly begin to open the eyes, never in a rush. You can begin stretching if needed. So, this is a style of meditation that I've been doing a bit more recently, or been leading a bit more recently. It's kind of what I do in general. So I'm always interested on any feedback from that. If you found the meditation useful or confusing or anything else. However that experience was for you, if you would like to share, that's always appreciated. Giving me feedback helps me to kind of tailor the meditations a bit more to what y'all find useful. So, yeah. So one thing that I did in here that I've been doing a bit more, or leading a bit more recently, is the kind of focus on that in-between breath. And I don't talk about it that often, lately a bit more often, but so when you have these sensations, and as I mentioned briefly in the meditation, these three different kinds of breath have three different textures or feeling tones to them. With the in-breath, it feels like it's rising. So I like to kind of combine that with rising awareness up the spine. So sensation and the focus, the awareness that you're going through is the same as the sensation. So if the in-breath feels rising, I rise. So when we work up to the full body and I didn't necessarily state this, when we work up to the full body, what I'm doing, and if you would like to do it, of course, go for it, is in breath rising up from the soles of the feet up to the tip of the head, in between breath radiating out from the whole body, out breath guiding awareness back down to the soles of the feet, radiating out. So this kind of feeling of the in breath being this rising, the in between breath is really interesting and something that's fun to do. And we did this, I think, either last week or the week before, where you can choose to put more of your focus on the in between breath than on the in or out breath. And what ends up happening if you maintain that is kind of those in between breaths are really, in terms of sensation, they're more of a background breath. So that in between breath is still there even when you're breathing in and breathing out. It's just the only time it's easiest to notice is when there's no in or out breath, that brief pause in between. But something interesting that happens when you focus on that in between breath exclusively is they start to kind of stitch themselves together. So you just have this kind of calm radiance that comes from this kind of breathing, and it's really enjoyable, and it makes it pretty easy to stay focused, and it makes it easy for the mind to get really calm, because there's not a sense of rising or falling, there's just this sense of radiating. So I find that useful. So yeah, so that's pretty much it in terms of what I wanted to talk about. So I did see that there was a question here. Marisa asked if I would please talk about the different branches of Buddhism and what differentiates them. Okay. So first off, by no means am I an expert or even I would say relatively well versed on the differences between the schools of Buddhism, but I'll give it my best shot, right? So there's three main schools in Buddhism. There's Tera Vaada, which is generally the school that I practice, that I study in and practice. And Tera Vaada translates from Pali, it means doctrine of the elders. So it's the oldest existing tradition of Buddhism that's still practiced to today. I think there's older traditions, but they kind of pittered out and died out. But Tera Vaada is still practiced to this day. And it's predominantly practiced in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Burma, Sri Lanka, that portion of Asia. And it was what was predominantly practiced in the time of the Buddha. So you have that school. And then when Buddhism kind of spread into China, it mixed with Taoism. And you got Chan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism. And so the second school of Buddhism is called Mahayana. Mahayana translates from Sanskrit into the great vehicle. So with Mahayana, it's prevalent in China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and Taiwan. And of course, like right down the street and stuff. Same with Tera Vaada. There's plenty of places in San Diego, California, United States that practice it. But historically, where it's spread, it's those places. So Mahayana means the great vehicle. And I'll go through kind of the differences between them after I go through what they are, right? So, and then this Mahayana Buddhism spread to Tibet, and it merged with the native religion of Tibet, which is called Bon, B-O-N, Bon. And Bon is kind of a earth-based shamanism. So you have this Mahayana Buddhism, this great vehicle Buddhism, go and merge with shamanism, because Buddhism pretty much merges with whatever culture it goes into, whatever religion it goes into. It has this very fluid dynamic. It's often compared to water. where the Buddhism is the water, and then these different cultures are a vase, and the water will always conform to the shape of the vase. So it went up to Tibet and became Tibetan Buddhism, or Vajrayana. And Vajrayana means diamond vehicle. So these three schools of Buddhism, Tera Vaada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, they have certain things in common and then certain distinctions between them. The main thing that they have in common among all of them is the Four Noble Truths. In life, there is suffering. The cause of suffering is craving. The end of suffering is possible. And then the path of practice to the end of suffering is the Eightfold Path. And so then the other thing that they all have in common is the Eightfold Path. Right views, intentions, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. So these Four Noble Truths and these Eightfold Path and the Eightfold Path are prevalent throughout all schools of Buddhism. The Eightfold Path is emphasized more in Tera Vaada than in Mahayana or Vajrayana. Mahayana and Vajrayana focus more on the paramitas, or predominantly Mahayana focuses more on the paramitas, or the perfections, which you always hear Jeff talking about. Generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom, these 6 paramitas. So it's kind of a different approach to the Buddhist teachings. It's all pretty much the Eightfold Path, but it's a different way of approaching the teachings, right? And then in Tibet, a lot of the emphasis is placed on kind of more mystical attribute type of stuff. And I'm not a well-versed Tibetan Buddhist. I've only adopted maybe 1 or 2 practices from Tibetan Buddhism that I found beneficial, just because I haven't studied it that much. I'm sure there's many more, but so one of the main distinctions between these schools of Buddhism is within Tera Vaada, they subscribe to the belief that we have to take care of ourselves first. We have to free ourselves from suffering. We have to attain nibbana or nirvana, enlightenment, freedom, whatever you want to call it. We have to attain that within ourselves, within our own hearts and minds first, before we're in any position, in any shape to help other people free themselves. It's kind of that old phrase, like the blind leading the blind. Like, we have not yet seen the true nature of reality. We have not realized it within ourselves. So how are we supposed to guide other people to it, right? So that's kind of generally distinct to Tera Vaada, is we have to focus on getting ourselves right first, and then we can be of use to others. And of course, there's still acts of generosity and helping others and all of that kind of stuff, but more of the emphasis is placed on getting our own mind right, so we're less likely to cause pain and suffering to others. And we're more able and more collected to be able to help others in the most beneficial way possible. There's an old image of a child walking down the street, and he sees a butterfly struggling to kind of break free of its cocoon. Like, it's just hatched out of its cocoon and it's trying to break free. And so the child reaches down and picks up the cocoon and opens it so that the butterfly can fly free. But what the child doesn't know is that in order for a butterfly to be able to fly, be able to develop the muscles that it needs to fly and to function as a butterfly, it has to be able to leave the cocoon itself. It develops the muscles by freeing itself from the cocoon and flying. So in that act of compassion that this child had, he saw the butterfly suffering, and he tries to open the cocoon to help it. The butterfly actually flies up and then is unable to fly right and passes away. So that's kind of the image that's often associated or used to describe kind of Theravada's view of things, right? And then you have Mahayana, which means the great vehicle. Now, to understand kind of what's meant by great vehicle, Nirvana is often referred to as the further shore. So, like the other side of a river, right? And the Eightfold Path is this raft that we build ourselves that takes us to the other side of the river. When we attend to it, develop it, cultivate it until it's ripe, we can take the raft to the other side of the river. And then the raft is no longer useful to us, so we leave it there and we go on with the rest of our life, right? Because the Eightfold Path isn't necessary once you've freed the mind, because the Eightfold Path is a method of deliverance, right? It's a method of freeing the mind. Once the mind is freed, it's no longer needed. None of us are there yet, of course, but that's kind of the general imagery there. So Mahayana, meaning the great vehicle, refers to kind of helping others build their rafts on this shore. And it's based on that principle of that bodhisattva vow. The may I be reborn life after life until all beings are free from suffering. Until all beings are free from suffering, may I not be freed from the cycle of birth and death. And that's kind of this bodhisattva vow. It's this very selfless vow of, I'm going to help everyone else free themselves before I free myself. Because once I free myself, I won't have further births, etc. That's kind of the mind state there. I won't have further births, so I won't be able to help anyone in future lives. But if I cultivate life after life and help people life after life, I can help many more people to free themselves. And so that's this Mahayana, this great vehicle, where you're not just trying to get yourself across the river so that within the Tera Vaada view, so that you can then show other people the way across the river. Instead, you stay on the nearer shore, and you help other people build their raft and send them across. So that's kind of this practice, right? This bodhisattva practice. So that's the biggest distinction between Tera Vaada and Mahayana. In Tera Vaada, there's the belief that rebirth is really unpleasant, and there's this sense of samvega, this sense of dismay, the sense of, I need to end this perpetual cycle of birth and death as soon as possible. I need to free the mind as soon as possible. There's this urgency. Doesn't mean you can just do it like that, but there's that sense of urgency. And then with Mahayana, there's this sense of, it's okay, I can be reborn life after life, and I'll help as many people as I can. So that's kind of the biggest distinction between those two. Of course, this bodhisattva vow also exists in Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism, because Tibetan Buddhism sprung out from Mahayana. So the biggest distinction between Tibetan Buddhism and these other forms of Buddhism is there's a lot more colorful ritual, a lot more esoteric types of practice. Maybe next week I'll lead something called Deity Yoga. It's a type of Tibetan Buddhist meditation. It involves like visualizing a bodhisattva and stuff. It's something I really enjoy. It's one of the Tibetan practices I've incorporated into my own practice. So it involves a lot of like heavy visualization and understanding symbolism and things like that are really prevalent within Tibetan Buddhist art, and what different image and different iconography means, and using that kind of as a blueprint. It's kind of hard to explain because, again, I'm not that well versed in it, but that's the main distinction. So yes. And then of these three schools of Buddhism, many other schools have sprung out from them. That's kind of a whole nother class on its own, and I don't know if I'm that qualified to speak about that. But one of the things I will say, just a few honorable mentions, I guess, is from the Tera Vaada school of Buddhism through within Thailand, through this kind of Renaissance period of Buddhist ideas, you get the Damyut, or the Thai forest tradition. And this is that's the school of practice, the school of Buddhist practice that I most subscribe to, that I most follow. And this Thai forest tradition is basically a revivalist movement, where in Thailand you had kind of the government trying to make monks become not only be monks but also be school teachers, because there was some kind of like shortage on school teachers and all this stuff. And some monks said that's not the duties of a monk. We need to leave society again because we've got too ingrained in society, and we need to go back out into the wilderness and, you know, practice out there and really cultivate the mind out in the forest. So you have this Thai forest tradition, which is a revivalist movement. I really enjoy it, where they saw how kind of modern culture was influencing the teachings, and they tried to strip that away again and retreat and reestablish this practice in the purest sense that they knew how. So that's one honorable mention. Another honorable mention is something called Shingen Buddhism, Shingon, I believe. And it's a school of Japanese Buddhism where Zen came to Japan and merged with Shintoism, which is kind of like ancestral spirits, nature spirits, and all this kind of cool stuff. And they merged together. And you get, it's similar to Tibetan Buddhism, but it's Japanese esoteric Buddhism. And it's very interesting. I highly recommend researching it a bit. Yeah. So with that, we are out of time because I was asked one technical question, and of course I went on and on. So with that, we'll close with a transfer of merit. If comfortable, please join palms. May any merit gained from this meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings in all directions, without limit or exception, be healthy, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita upeka sahanga teya cetasa chaturi bharatva viharati samavudaro pavena samanamaro pavena samasangharo pavena sote hontu nirantarang. Have a good night, everyone.